on to the next item, which is update on the quiet zones. And I believe Mr. Russell Thompson will be taking the lead on this. And Kathy, did you want to introduce the item while he gets set up?
Yes. So, Council, as you're aware, with the coming of the SMART train, there has been a lot of conversations about safety and noise, et cetera. The quiet zones, the city had conversations probably, I want to say, over a year ago now, and conversations about quiet zones. And the direction from council was to put in place quiet zones and have them ready to implement prior to active revenue service. So our public works staff, both Russ Thompson, our public works director, and our prior engineering manager, Julian Skinner, have been working with the different regulatory agencies and a private consultant to put things together. So what we have for you tonight is an update on the quiet zones and an opportunity for council to also give us some direction. So with that, I will I know Russ has a PowerPoint to put up so he can, so I think it'll make it easier for members of the public to understand some of the information that we're going to present.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're glad to be here tonight, give you an update, have some good news and some exciting news about the progress of quiet zones here in Novato. So tonight we're going to give you an update, give you a little detail on the status of quiet zone number 1. We also, as the staff report indicated, we will have a second quiet zone for the Highway 37 branch, which is unrelated to the SMART service. It's the freight-only line that goes out along Highway 37. And we have a little wrinkle to deal with in the coming months that we'll need to address at State Access Road pedestrian crossing in the Hamilton area. There was a wrinkle that came up through our field review with the FRA and CPUC staff, California Public Utilities Commission staff. So we'll go through the options there and the decision points that we'll have. So far, staff, and we have retained a consultant, but we have updated all of the crossing data. We've reanalyzed all the safety features that have been put in, updated the information about the crossing. We had a field review with FRA and CPUC staff and SMART staff, walked all of the crossings, looked at the equipment that was installed, and got FRA and the PUC comments on that. We've been communicating quite a bit with Marin County Public Works on the Highway 37 quiet zone, and we have actually processed and submitted the notice of intent for the first quiet zone. We'll talk about that. And so we will move forward. So with the first quiet zone, we learned from FRA that the quiet zone for the main SMART line that runs through town north-south has to be separate from the freight traffic. It's because the speed of the trains is completely different, the frequency is completely different, so they want those to be separate quiet zones. Since SMART doesn't run out Highway 37, it's a totally different character of the use of that line. And so all of the safety features and the analysis is dependent a great deal on the speed of the trains. And so they want to separate those. It means no difference to us. There's no fee or there's no additional work. There's a little bit of additional work to submit 2 separate reports, but it's not a big deal from a staff's perspective. So we submitted the notice of intent on the first quiet zone, and I'll show you a map of the extents of that quiet zone that was submitted the beginning a few days ago, about a week ago. That 60-day comment period will run through August 5th. We should have comments. We're hopeful that we'll receive all the comments from the different stakeholders before that, but we should hear no later than August 5th. Based on our site review and our walk of the sites with the FRA and CPUC, there were really no issues that jumped out to those staff members, to our consultant we've hired, to SMART. There was really no issues established other than the complication of the state access PED crossing. So we're on track. Everything should be, get the comments back. We don't expect any negative or additional work to come out of that. And then we will have, in November, we will have to file the notice of establishment, which is the next step. It's another document that needs to be submitted to the FRA. And then once that's accepted and they verify that all the comments have been addressed, then 21 days later, the horns will be silenced. And so we'll coordinate that with SMART, as they're still on track. And as of yesterday, we went to an event with SMART, and they're still saying that December, the end of the year is when they expect to start service. So, and we'll keep in touch with them and refine that as necessary. So here's a map, kind of depicts the quiet zone that's been submitted. So it runs from the north end of town all the way down to Hamilton Parkway. The first surface street, public surface street that is affected would be Rush Creek Place, and then that all of the crossings through town all the way down to Hamilton Parkway would be in that quiet zone.
Russ, can you maybe just mention for members of the public that may not have heard this presentation before, so the quiet zones, what it means and what horns occur when the train actually stops at the stations versus crossing the intersections?
Sure. So without a quiet zone, a train has to sound its signal at every surface crossing that it crosses roughly a quarter of a mile prior to actually crossing that. So as it approaches a street crossing, it will sound its horn, one short blast, two long blasts, all the way until it occupies the crossing. And so it's a very loud horn, it's 106 decibels, I think. Very loud horn. We've been hearing it as they've been testing the trains. And so at every crossing, they will sound that horn. What was your other?
So, but with the implementation of the quiet zones, once that's put in and once we go through the process we just talked about, and once SMART has finished their testing, the quiet zones go into place, and then those horns, just for members of the public, the terminology sometimes is confusing. It basically implements a quiet zone, and those horns do not occur at those crossings. Right. There still is a horn that occurs when they approach the stations. So that's the piece I want to have clarity. Can you communicate that?
And it's actually, yes, and so the stations are not affected. So the stations, the train will come into the station, and as it departs, it will sound the horn one short blast when it leaves the station. And so the additional safety improvements, for those that haven't heard or been to one of our many meetings, what SMART has done is as part of their project, they've installed additional safety measures at all the crossings so that they are what's quote unquote quiet zone ready. And the Federal Railroad Authority can prove, they have thousands of crossings across the United States, and that they can show statistically when these additional safety improvements are installed that without the train sounding their horn, that there is an equivalent level of safety provided to the public at those crossings. So it doesn't mean there's never going to be an accident, but it does mean that by silencing the train horns and installing these additional gates and curbs and additional safety measures, that it's as safe as if the horn was sounding.
And the actual train conductor, whatever the proper terminology, if they believe there is a safety situation, have the ability, even within the quiet zone, then to use the horn in a specific situation.
Yes.
So some of the background context I just felt was important to provide.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
So on the second quiet zone on the Highway 37 branch, an additional thing that we learned on that site walk and then going through the updated risk calculations is that there was some question on Renaissance Road out by Stone Tree Golf Course if we needed to install an additional median out there. After going through the calculations, talking to FRA and CPUC, they have agreed that due to the slow speed of the freight trains out there, that we do not need to install that median. So that was good news. We were ready to do that work if it was required, but they're saying that it's not required. So this quiet zone, and let me go to the next map here. Here's an overview. So this is the quiet zone out by the golf course, Atherton Road, where it intersects with Highway 37, kind of the Black Point area. Has two crossings. It'll have on the west side Renaissance and on the east side Grandview Avenue. And Grandview Avenue is a county road, and so we are working right now with Marin County Public Works on an agreement that just confirms that they understand we're establishing a quiet zone, that it impacts a road within their jurisdiction, and they will need to write a letter of support saying they don't take exception to us filing the application. So in talks with staff, they understand that all of the safety equipment is within the smart right-of-way. This is at Grandview is where they've installed what's called a quad gate system. It's kind of the highest level of safety measures that SMART would install. And all of that equipment is contained within the smart right-of-way. So we're not asking them to maintain a road or a median or something outside the smart right-of-way. So they've been more receptive after we've talked through those issues. They've been more receptive to kind of playing along with us filing this quiet zone out there. And I think it's important to note when we think about the second quiet zone out here, this is an area that for years has had freight train traffic. It's nothing new to them. They're not impacted by the SMART train or the SMART project. So people out there, from our staff's experience, they're less mobilized or energized about the train horn issues because they've been living with it for years. And they only have, typically they'll have 4 or 5 trains, in a week with regular service. So it's kind of a different context than the north-south line that goes through town with the SMART train. Yes, and so as soon as we get that letter, get the agreement in place and a letter of support from SMART, we'll probably bring the agreement back to council on a consent agenda in the near future, and then go ahead and file that quiet zone for the Highway 37 quiet zone. So that brings us to the Hamilton area and the state access road pedestrian crossing. So this came a little bit out of left field. It's been in none of the discussions so far over the years, coming to this decision point. But the representative from the FRA said that the quiet zone cannot end at the pedestrian crossing, the train station, or Main Gate, because Main Gate is not a surface interchange. It's not where the train tracks and the road don't intersect there. It's an underpass. So by definition, by federal standards, federal rules, the quiet zone can't end at the PED crossing or the train station. So it only left us a few options. One immediate option was, well, let's see if we can combine quiet zones with San Rafael or create a new quiet zone that went from Hamilton Parkway down to Smith Ranch Road. It's a bit messy because of the getting an agreement in place. It's different in character from the Highway 37 branch. And in initial meetings with the executive staff at San Rafael, it just became obvious that their time frame, they had already submitted their quiet zone application. They were not interested in slowing down or stopping or kind of refiguring out how this combined quiet zone was going to be put in effect, and they were not supportive or not receptive of doing a joint quiet zone. So the only options we saw or we see at this point, moving forward, and we do have some options. The first one would be something that our David McCrossan, our consultant, brought up is we could install what's called a wayside horn, and it's in the picture there. It's not a great picture, but it's basically a horn that would be on the structure of the crossing, of the pedestrian crossing, and I have pictures later. They're horns directed down at where people would stop or approach that crossing, and the horns are still very loud, and they would sound for the same amount of time, but they would be focused more down, localized at that crossing itself, rather than starting on the train tracks, on the train from a quarter of a mile away and blasting that whole area. So the consultant said that the noise footprint or the decibel level footprint is much smaller, but it's still loud. It's the same decibel level required by federal standards at the crossing, but it's right there at the crossing rather than from a quarter of a mile away. So if you had no other options, it might be something that, an agency would consider to help quiet it down somewhat, but it is not going, I don't feel from discussions with the consultant, I don't feel like it's something the general public out there would be too happy about, because it's still very close to homes in the adjacent neighborhoods, and it's still going to be loud, but it's better than the train horn on the train itself. The second option would be to remove the PED crossing and just remove the equipment and just fence it off. CPUC, FRA, SMART, everybody loves the idea. I mean, in their mind, eliminating any crossing is a good thing. And so they are very supportive of going through that process, and have assured me it would be very easy and straightforward. And so that is an option. The other option would be allow the train horns to sound and just have no quiet zone from Hamilton Parkway south. So here's a map, kind of to give you a little context of where the crossing is. It's where the red dot there is. It's where State Access Road comes down off of Nave Drive. It's directly at the end of State Access Road. So the train horn would sound, a quarter mile in advance of that crossing, is just south of Hamilton Parkway, about where Homeward Bound is. So that's where the horn would start sounding if it on a southbound train. If it's coming out of the station northbound, it would only be a very short distance out of the station, and it would have to sound the horn for the crossing, 15 seconds in advance of getting to the crossing. So as we know from the public hearings we held when we packed the council chambers, there's 99.9% of the people were, in support of doing something to silence the horns. So here's a picture. I probably should have started. The bottom picture is the historic look of that crossing, and we're all kind of puzzled by, how did years and years ago, how did this develop into a crossing? Because that picture at the bottom is what it used to look like. It's very informal. It was not like there was a paved sidewalk or something crossing there. I got to believe there's a lack of information on how it exactly evolved, but the top picture is what it looks like today. The multi-purpose pathway will come and attach to that and continue west. But it's pretty minimal. So there are impacts. I came up with this diagram just to show that there is impacts if we did choose to close that crossing there. If you were, say, in the Newport subdivision, I'm looking at the yellow dotted line there, if a child was going to be walking towards to the charter school, it now would come down, across the street, and go across the crossing, and then come down C Street to the school site. The white dash indicates if that crossing was closed, that same child or person would have to walk down the multi-purpose pathway, past the SMART station to Main Gate, and then along the existing sidewalk, over the top of the railroad tracks on the bridge to the charter school. But it adds a little under a half a mile to the walk. So that is an impact. Here, from the reverse direction, if you were in Lanham Village and you wanted to get to the Bay Trail or come down to the community center. Right now, they would come through Lanham Village, down State Access Road, and across the crossing. The interesting thing is when this issue came up, we went out and did some counts of how many people are using this, and I was particularly concerned about school, the hour before school and the hour after school was out. The times we counted, we had 8 in the morning. Peak crossings is about 8 people, 3 adults that looked like they were going to, just on a walk, maybe from Lanham Village, coming towards Hamilton, and five children. Well, four children and an adult. There was 2 children that were walking unattended and crossed that crossing in the morning. So that gives you an idea of that's probably the busiest hour in a day sees 8 people. So pretty low use, but people in Lanham Village they would be impacted because they'd have to either walk to Main Gate, kind of the reverse of that white dashed line I had, or they could go out to Nave around Hamilton Parkway and down. And again, it adds about a little under a half a mile to their walk. So it's something that part of our recommendation is that knowing what we know about the Hamilton area and the need to do effective public outreach, we're not asking you to make a decision tonight, but we would want to take this issue, if directed by council, if you're interested in closing that crossing, that we would do, or installing the wayside horns for that matter, do a public outreach effort over the next 30 to 45 days, get on the Hamilton Forum, start getting information out, get some public notices sent out, and do the outreach with the stakeholders. I've listed a few there, and receive some input, because there's likely going to be some people, maybe parents, that like walking across that to the school, or people in Lanham Village that use that regularly. But staff's recommendation at this point, knowing what we know about the quiet zone impacts, our recommendation would be to close the crossing. Seems like the message from the surrounding neighborhood was loud and clear, that they don't want to hear the horn sounding. And our only real option at this point to eliminate the horns would be to close that crossing. In the staff report, I talked about the wayside horn. Installation, according to our consultant, would run about $50,000 to install a wayside horn. I talked to, after the staff report was published, I had a chance to follow up with Bill Gamlin, and he said they would install it. If that's the direction we took, it would impact their getting their system up and debugged and operational. But he said if that was the council's desire and Novato decided to install a wayside horn, they would do that. Of course, we would be on the hook to pay for those improvements. Likewise, if we close the crossing, there would be a minimal amount to take the equipment off. He said they would surplus that and use it elsewhere or use it as a backup system. And then we would likely install some simple fencing across there to just redirect people to the pathway. So there would be a little bit of expense. The city does have some budget set aside for smart projects. It's been carrying over for a couple of years, but we do have about a little over $50,000 left in that account to, do some smart integration. So that's an option also. So that was it. I could love to answer any questions or go over in more detail. But we are asking council tonight to provide or have a discussion about the closure, the wayside horn, and how we might time the outreach to the Hamilton area and the stakeholders.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation, Russ. Really appreciate how concise and clear it was. I'm going to start with questions from council members, starting with Councilmember Lucan.
Russ, thanks for the report. Just a couple quick follow-up questions. One was on an earlier slide. I think it was your slide number 4. Just to understand the timeline here. So the comment period is going to end on August 5th, but we're not planning to file the notice of establishment until November. Is that because we're trying to time the enactment of the quiet zone with when the rail service starts?
Correct, and that's, I didn't do a great deal of background, but council directed us in March of 2015, when council decided, yes, we want to pursue quiet zones, but that had the stipulation on it, but they would not be put in place prior to regular service. So we wanted to go through the testing period while the trains were on a very sporadic schedule, in an abundance of caution. We wanted to go ahead and have the horns sounded through the testing period, and that we would be in a position to silence the horns before they went into full service.
Great. So if SMART came back and said, you know what, we're ahead of schedule, we're going to be able to start service in November, assuming they give us 21 days notice, we'll be able to just move up our notice of establishment and be right in line with when service starts.
So there's about 3 or 4 months of float or cushion in our schedule that we're going to be just basically waiting to time it correctly with SMART.
Great.
So, yeah.
And maybe just one other item to SMART, if SMART, once the quiet zones are put in place, they can be fined if they use the horn and there isn't a reason. So that's part of the issue. They operationally have to be ready for those quiet zones to go in place. If they say to us they're ready earlier and we could go earlier, then we'll start earlier. So we'll be in communication. But the direction from council before was, basically to time it when revenue service started. Again, because it really is an operational safety issue that needs to be coordinated with them.
Great. And I think along those lines, too, is continue to communicate with the city of San Rafael. It probably for SMART, it'd be best if those are established at or around the same time to make it easier for the operators and not sounding, then not sounding again. We want rail safety at the end of the day is really what we're all shooting for.
I agree. It sounds like, just in our meetings with their executive staff, they seem to be in a bigger hurry to establish it sooner than we are. So
Okay.
whether that changes over time or not, but we would certainly monitor it.
Yeah.
I wanted to add, yesterday we went on a great, basically a site visit, got to ride the SMART train. Anyway, Jason Nutt from Santa Rosa was there, the Public Works Director. And he said, they had been staunch opponents to quiet zones, but they are now that the train's running, people are hearing the horns, that they are going to, consider it too. And so I think that's many communities in Sonoma County were kind of opposed to it, but I think they're coming around to the value of getting the quiet zones established.
Great.
Eric, I'm sorry, can I just mention one other thing? I did really want to make sure that we are clear we talked about, kind of the trying to wrap the first quiet zone with City of San Rafael. I want to be really clear to the council and community. We've had a great working relationship with City of San Rafael on a whole variety of issues, partnering on this. I think we're each trying to just control our own destiny and move this forward based on our own community, but they've been great partners and will continue to be.
Great. Wonderful. And then actually my next question is somewhat related to that. It's on your slide number 9, where we talked about that second bullet point about a combined San Rafael Novato quiet zone not really being an option. They've already started their process. We've started our process. What if we did have I guess it would be Hamilton Parkway up until Smith Ranch Road, a totally separate quiet zone? I know you've had some conversations at the staff level. Certainly we have colleagues at the council level. Just kind of want to get your thoughts or opinion on that, if that's one potential other option as well.
In preliminary discussions with the FRA representative, they're supportive. I think in a perfect world, they would like one quiet zone. So it's definitely an option. San Rafael would have to be willing to and us would have to, get into the agreement. It would delay the process because basically we were told that each agency would have to withdraw their application, their current application, and then submit a revised application. Oh, but you're asking if we could do a third.
Actually, a third one. So similar like what we're doing for the Black Point area, we would just say, all right, we're going to do a new quiet zone that only covers Hamilton Parkway to Smith Ranch Road. Smith Ranch Road's probably already included in San Rafael's, so we're really just enacting a quiet zone for one crossing, I guess.
It has to begin and end at a public street crossing, but you can't overlap them. So if the quiet zone was going to occur you can't begin and end a quiet zone at the same crossing. So there is a
Gotcha.
complication there. So that's why both applications would have to be reformatted.
So they would have to amend theirs to take Smith Ranch Road out so that it could be included in this hypothetical cross your fingers quiet zone number 3, and that probably explains the hesitation.
Yeah, and
Okay.
they have I don't know, I'm not super familiar with all their crossings, but the crossing immediately south of Smith Ranch Road is a private crossing, and it goes to the golf course so then they would have to fall back to the next public street crossing, and then it creates a gap. They have the same Hamilton, the pedestrian crossing problem we have. They would have it at that private crossing where they can't begin or end a quiet zone at a private crossing. And
Gotcha.
so that's the complication.
It sounds like you guys really thoroughly exhausted every option out there. I appreciate it.
It looked like we would have to combine and create one quiet zone.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Mayor Potem Mathis?
Thanks for a great report. You're always very concise. Thanks very much. Just a couple questions. How does the wayside horn, if that was put in, does it sound? How does it get activated?
So just like there is sensors on the tracks that as the train approaches and triggers a sensor on the tracks that says the train's here, put the crossing gates down. That same sensor, or a sensor just like that, would then tell the horns, okay, a train's approaching, it's time to come on and sound the horn.
So would it be that quarter mile you were talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other one would be, if we did remove the ped crossing, and maybe I'm getting into too much detail, so feel free to tell me, what would that look like? I mean, because, people have a tendency to crawl over things or cut things or, because it was an easy access before and the shortest distance. So what would a closure, look like?
We would take the equipment down. So let me go to that picture. So in that top picture, we see the lights and the cross
Right.
signs, and those poles would come out. Smart would remove those and just take them to their yard. I would recommend that we remove the asphalt leading up to the concrete panels. I don't think we would mess with the concrete panels in the tracks, but I would take the asphalt out. My recommendation, and we would talk to the FRA and SMART, but I would recommend that we go, probably 100 feet either side of that crossing with fencing and maybe further. But just as a reminder that, we'd put some signage up that, do not cross. And so I think it would just be fencing down both sides.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Friday?
Thank you, Russ. So just to follow up on those questions, from a purely pedestrian safety perspective, if you added those fences and did those changes, mitigation changes that you just discussed, how would you compare the two options, the adding the horn and the taking away the ped crossing?
I think the horn is not going to be accepted well, from what I know of the neighborhood and what we heard at the, prior to you being on the council in the March 2015 hearings. I mean, people were passionate and adamant about not hearing the horns.
Well, I understand that, but from a pedestrian safety perspective, how would you compare the two, simply from a safety perspective?
So I think it's an equivalency thing.
Okay.
I think the FRA standards are based on statistics, and so they will say that those wayside horns are as effective or equally, provides the same level of safety as the train horn.
I'm asking you to compare it to removing the pedestrian.
Oh. Well, I think if we remove it and fence it, I personally, I can't see saying, to your 10-year-old child, hey, look both ways when you cross the railroad tracks. I'd be a little uneasy, or my third grader, and having them walk to school across that crossing. So I think whether you fence it or put the wayside horns on it, I think the fencing would be safer
Okay, thank you.
by eliminating it.
Russ, one question. Can you go to the map piece? Sorry, just want to follow up. So is SMART doing any other fencing, just for the community? The neighborhood's used to being able to, one, there's a pedestrian crossing, but kind of being able to cross through that area. What fencing is SMART going to be putting along there that will already change the character of that crossing?
They are in the process of installing fence now, and to tell you the truth, I'm not exactly sure. Their intent is not to fence the entire route of their train. So they look at it a bit strategically, looking where the pedestrian traffic is. I can't answer that question of where they're fencing along here, but we could certainly get that and bring it back.
It's just a comment, I think, is where if SMART is already going to be doing some fencing for safety reasons for themselves, that is going to change the character of the neighborhood in terms of what folks are used to being able to do. I just think that's an information point that we need to have, depending on whatever direction council gives us, and then how that impacts the rest of this.
Sure. So they have been installing, I would say, a variety of fencing. Even in Novato, some of it is just standard 6-foot chain link. The portion adjacent to where the downtown station would be is what they call a high security. It's a finer, heavier duty, kind of a finer, it's harder to get a toe hold in it. And then north of Grant, they have put in more of a 4 or 5 foot high vinyl cladded, fence that's not as security looking as a 6-foot chain link fence. So they have in some areas I think they have barbed wire fence, and so there's a variety of fence products they use.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Drew?
It's definitely a thorny problem. You're expecting it to be a 6-foot high fence?
I think we would probably talk to the FRA and CPUC and SMART and come to a mutual agreement.
And who will be bearing the cost of that fencing?
I think for the crossing itself, I think we would be on the hook for that fencing, just because SMART has already installed the improvements for the pedestrian crossing. So I don't see that being fruitful to say, hey, can you take that out and fence it instead? They would ask us to do that.
So how would the cost of the fencing compare to the wayside horns?
I think it'd be substantially cheaper.
So say $20,000?
I think we could easily do the demolition and fencing for that, yes.
So we'll be out for 20. The thing that occurs to me is the library, the location of the library. That's not been mentioned. A lot of library programs do depend on kids being able to have access to the building. I think it should be thought about as it restricts access to the library. That's important. On the other hand, if you have plans in the future to create other roads in that area or other access, it's not as if it would have to be fenced off forever, because there might be another pedestrian crossing established at a later date. Or is this forever?
I wouldn't say it's forever. I think adding an additional ped crossing would be difficult because CPUC and FRA don't support them. And would, like I said, in our discussions, they would love to see this one go away. They're not big fans of pedestrian crossings. So there's no proposed road crossing out there. There's nothing in our circulation element or anticipated development out there where we would extend state access road across the railroad tracks at this point.
We couldn't pay the city of San Rafael expenses to make the alteration that Councilmember Lucan suggested, even with the private crossing and the Smith Ranch Road crossing.
We would be happy to pursue, if that's council's desire, we could try to, re-engage San Rafael on options if that's the council's desire.
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of cost. I think it's a matter of, frankly, they've made a variety of commitments that they want to their community, and they want to make sure that they can control and implement those commitments, and that's putting quiet zones in for them. So, it seems a little strange that we could, we've both put them in, that we couldn't add something even once they're input, but the process is fairly precise and rigorous. So some things that maybe we think have made sense, are not options under some of the federal regulations for a variety of safety reasons. But, we could talk to them again and talk to the FRA if there's an opportunity to do something after the fact, but I do not believe from conversations I've had with San Rafael is, they made their commitment, they want to move theirs forward, and they don't want any glitch to occur that impacts the noise impacts for their community.
Okay, the last thing I want to observe is that if it is increasing the route by 0.4 of a mile, it is effectively cutting off the walkability for that area for these children completely. You're not going to get too many third graders that are going to walk a half mile to begin with. You'll be getting some hardy ones, but you're sure not going to get very many who are going to be walking a mile or a mile and a half. We had an old saying about living on the other side of the railroad tracks years and years ago. There was a reason for that. Railroad tracks divide communities. They are a big physical barrier, just like very wide highways are big physical barriers, just like freeways are big physical barriers. So we are taking a step that is going to definitely affect these neighborhoods around. It will not be insignificant at all, and we are to some extent cutting off Lantham Village as well from the amenities of the Baylands. I don't have an answer, but I think there's significant damage that's going to be done to the people and the buildings around.
I have several questions too. First of all, it's too bad we didn't start this application process earlier. Because San Rafael did submit their application before we did. And possibly if we had started it earlier, we might have found this glitch and we would not be in this situation that we're in now. That's hindsight. It's 2020, but it does bring back some of the comments that were made last year. With regards to this issue, is it only because San Rafael does not want their implementation of the quiet zone to be delayed? Have they promised their residents that it was going to be instituted earlier?
That's what I heard in those meetings, that they were on their deadline or their goal to get theirs established was well in advance of ours, several months sooner than ours.
So have we thought of maybe even engaging Congressman Huffman's office to talk with the FRA to see if there's any way that there can be, a modification of our application to go down to San Rafael, but just short of their quiet zone spot? To me, it sounds like it's I hate to say this, but it's sort of a bureaucratic stumbling block here. So has there been any thought about talking to Congressman Huffman to see if there's anything he can do?
No, we've not looked at, any political options. Part of it was to come back here tonight and give council an update. We recognize there's not an elegant solution out. We brainstormed, tried a variety of different ways. We've pushed back with FRA to explore different options. And I, appreciate the comments that Councilmember Drew said. It will, if we end up pulling it out and putting up fence, it will change the feel of that neighborhood. It's not inconsequential.
Right.
So
on the horn, how many times is the horn blown? Is it just once, or is it
At the
twice?
head crossing, it would be this, is similar to what's required for the train. So it's the entire time the train approaches from a quarter of a mile away until it occupies the crossing. It would continue to repeat through that.
So it would be more than
Wow.
twice. It would keep going until the train got there,
Yes.
and it would be all automated.
The wayside horn, yes, it
Yes.
could be automated.
And the decibel level is the same as the train, but it's pointed down, so theoretically, you may get some absorption of the sound, but maybe some reflection as well.
Yeah,
Have we tried to get a wayside horn,
side horn.
just to see how loud it is, and putting it down just to see how far it might travel?
No.
Okay. Something we might want to think about. Going back to your slide number 4, in terms of establishing the notice of establishment in November, I have to tell you, at least once a week, or sometimes 2 times a week, I get a call from somebody who works at home at Hamilton or other locations near the railroad tracks that said, I've had enough of the testing. I don't need any more testing. So is there an option if we wanted to do this notice of establishment earlier, like if Centerville is going to be doing that? Is that something that we have the option of doing and not just necessarily doing it in November?
The staff remains supportive of allowing the train horns to sound during testing until SMART is on a regular pattern of service and the crossings are predictable, that we would continue to recommend that that we don't establish the quiet zone until regular service begins. It is up to it is a council decision. I mean, council collectively can instruct me to do it sooner, and we can.
So what if Centerville does it earlier? Does that change your recommendation?
No.
Okay. And at what point, so we do the notice of establishment, then the horns are silenced in 21 days after that. At what point do we send out a press release or notice all the neighborhoods that the quiet zones are now in place and the horns will not be rung by the train? I think that's the right term.
Yeah, I think we would need to consider some kind of getting the word out that, the quiet zones are going to be established on this date, and be prepared, because it'll be a changed condition.
So we don't have a plan for that yet.
no, but that would be a piece that we would be working with FRA and SMART and our communications staff to really put together a communications plan. I think part of it is really understanding that notice of establishment. Is that a perfunctory time heads up so you can use that 21 days for communication, or is that an opportunity for SMART to say we're not ready yet? It can't go into effect. So I think there's a question, and Russ maybe know the answer to this one, but part of it is what could occur. What we don't want to go out is say, yeah, they're going to be in 21 days, there'll be no more horns, and then with that process, SMART can push back, and then we have to wait 3 more weeks. So there is a coordination. Again, we're working closely with SMART on a variety of issues. We will stay engaged with them as we work through this.
And I would also suggest that we work closely with Centerville, because if Centerville establishes theirs earlier, then it might be confusing to people whether you hear it in one location, not the other. Going to slide number 7. on quiet zone number 2, you list Renaissance and Grandview as the 2 crossings, but what about the private crossing? Are we going to be asking for a quiet zone on the private crossing as well?
The quiet zone in this, I mean, the private crossing to the
Yes.
industrial buildings, that will be included.
That will be included. Okay,
silenced.
great.
So they would get, as all the crossing owners on the one we have submitted, everybody got a certified letter saying this is, quiet zone's going into place, so they would receive notification.
In terms of getting outreach on the issue of the pedestrian crossing, I think we've learned that the Hamilton Forum doesn't necessarily reach all the residents, and we also have to make sure that the businesses and the other folks that are in that area be noticed as well. So I would recommend that we do noticing because this is a big issue. At one of the Hamilton forums that we had out there where this issue came up, and I went out there with some residents at night, and I was shocked. There was a lot of people using them. We had, I observed kids on bicycles crossing there. I saw adults with dogs crossing there, and they live all over Hamilton, and they cross right there. Not only is the library there, but I understand that the school district has plans to use their property adjacent or right across the street on C Street from the library. In fact, I think that they're thinking about enlarging the library. I don't know what their final plans are, so you're going to get a lot more use of that. And I don't, that's a traditional crossing, so I think we want to get input before a final decision is made. With that, then, I'd like to open up for public comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to talk about the quiet zones? Seeing no one rush up. We'll close the public comment. So you're going to then go out and get input on what we want to do with this pedestrian crossing, right? And present the 3 options: closure, horn, or quiet zone. And then I would assume you would do everything you can, and maybe even utilize us as well to talk to Centerfeld to see if that option for a quiet zone is possible at all.
Well, I think if, in terms of going out to the community, we would confirm with FRA and Centerfeld whether any combination on the quiet zone is an option. If that's not an option, and again, our understanding from our communication with them, it is not an option at this point, then that needs to not be on the table. Then we really are, how do we, do you not have a quiet zone? That's an option. And, maybe you try that for a while. Do you put the other horn on, or do you close it? So I think we need to be careful when we go to the community. I don't want to put out false hope for quiet zone that may not be there and raise expectations either.
Right. But be sure to check with Congressman Huffman's office as well to see if there's something that they could do with FRA.
We can definitely.
If there's flexibility.
Yeah, we can see if there is. The regulations are fairly tight, but we can see if there's anything there.
Do you need a motion from us?
Do we need a motion then to reach out to the community on that pedestrian crossing?
If you would do that, that would be great.
All right, I will make a motion to direct staff to schedule a public workshop and future public hearing on the closure, or I guess potential closure of state access road pedestrian crossing, or the installation of a wayside horn, or no quiet zone in that area.
I second.
Okay, Sherry, if you could call the roll.
Councilmember Drew?
Aye.
Councilmember Friday?
Quick question, is the charter school included in that for purposes of noticing? And the
We
library?
would be noticing everyone along charter school along the street there, yeah. And so there would be a fairly wide.
Well, actually, I think that you need to notice the Hamilton neighborhood as well, because a lot of them walk there, not just the folks.
No, I'm sorry, I was answering Councilmember Friday's. Staff will look, there'll be a variety of neighborhoods that would be noticed based on, as we look at some of the patterns, et cetera, and then we'll use some of the broader communication that we have as well.
Don't forget the businesses as
I
well.
know I heard that as well, thank you.
Okay.
Councilmember Lucan?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mathis?
Aye.
And Mayor Eklund?
Aye. Great. Thank you, Russ, again
you.
for that. And we'll go on to, actually, why don't we take a 5-minute break, come back at 8:25. That clock is a little fast, so we'll come back at 8:25.